Today, I'm in the Otways in Victoria to visit Paul and Wendy Troughton. Paul and Wendy grow incredible shiitake mushrooms, which are one of my favourite ingredients. Now, I don't know a lot about how to grow shiitake, so I think we're going to learn loads, and most importantly, we get to do some cooking. So, Paul, we're here today in the beautiful Otways. What brought you here and got you into farming here?
I am a New Zealander originally and happened to meet a lovely girl from Winchelsea, and her father said, if you're ever coming to farm over here, you want to be here, and put a circle on the map, and Jurang Meat was right in the middle of it. We've been here for about 14 or 15 years and really love it here. Got all this beautiful clean air and green grass.
So, Paul, mushrooms and dairy is not the most common of farming combinations, but you've made it work.
We may be the only one in Australia doing that combo, I think. Jurang's had some hard times, so it was nice to find something that's completely different, actually.
Yes.
I'd grown mushrooms in England years ago, so I thought, well, I wouldn't mind having a go at that, and knowing that mushrooms were, well, particularly shiitakes, were going to be something that people do like. The demand was there.
Yep.
We have some pretty busy days, particularly if we've got to milk and then come over and pick mushrooms. They're the challenging days. We do make it work, and it's been an interesting journey, I have to say.
And what are the keys to growing mushrooms and farming them?
Where we are is good with this climate here. That really helps. Look, we can manipulate the environment in the shed, but it's of course a lot more economic if we don't. So if we are just having good conditions, like we've probably got now, sort of early 20s is sort of perfect for the shiitakes. Having a good environment does help.
Well, maybe we can go have a quick look at the shed and learn a bit more about the mushrooms?
Yeah, let's do that.
Do it. Paul, this room is absolutely amazing, and these mushrooms look beautiful. Can you tell us about how you get them to grow to this stage? What is it they're growing on?
So growing on a wooden substrate, so I'll show you that. We can, basically sawdust, so.
Oh, yeah.
And the mycelium, which is the white, grows through the log.
Yeah.
And when we've got them in this nice climate for them, humid is important.
Yep.
They go, wow, spring's here, it's warm enough.
It's time to open
and
up.
Start opening up, and going from the little babies here, after 2 or 3 days, I'll start putting these up.
Yep.
And then 3 or 4 days, we're sort of getting to about this size here.
Yep.
And then 5, 6 days, we're starting to pick mushrooms. So,
oh, good.
Yeah, so
and that's sort of, that's the life cycle from when the little baby mushroom comes out?
A little bit longer, depending on the temperature.
Yes.
You know, that's the big determinant in that. If it's warm, they'll go a little bit quicker. Awesome. In the winter, though, obviously a bit slower.
And you control the climate in this room?
We can, to some degree, because chefs want mushrooms all year round.
Yeah.
We can put the conditioning on if we need to.
And it's a bit moist in here. That's a good thing for mushrooms as well.
Moisture's good. Yeah. No, they like humidity, and you have to have a diurnal temperature ideally too. So they actually like having a cooler period at night, so it works well. So we just let nature do its thing, ideally.
And how many shiitake mushrooms will come out of one of these logs?
Probably get 5 or 6 or 700 grams off a log, just depending on how well they go before we compost them back down.
Amazing. In this room, there's a fair few logs I can see, so you're growing a lot of mushrooms.
Actually, no, it's really quite boutique compared to big mushroom farms. It's enough to keep us busy. That's
and for you, it's about the quality rather than the quantity. That's a big importance for you and Wendy.
Quality and consistency of the grading, and so a chef will see our label on it and say, well, OK, that's for us foods, open it up, and they're nice, and you can just tell that they're good. Well, it's hard to get the perfect mushroom, you ask Wendy.
And you've got shiitakes. Is there different types of shiitake that you grow?
Different strains that you can get, and we have the ability to order in basically what we want to suit. So these ones on the log are quite sparse, which is really a good thing. If we have had them in the past where there's just a whole heap of little buds, we'd call them, which we have to take off and just give them room to grow, or they squish in and they just look terrible. And
what are the issues you see? Like, what do you come across that hinder growing the mushrooms?
As the logs degrade and they get older, there'll be competing moulds that'll get in here too. So hence, we can only really get the 3 flushes out of them, and then we'll have to throw them.
So you want the good moulds, not the bad moulds? That's the...
Yeah.
Oh, there's a good mould for you, which is this beautiful white mycelium.
Well, once it's fully colonised like it is, it's really hard for other moulds to take
Amazing.
shiitake root in there, but you know, once they will eventually as the logs get older. But.
Yeah. So the mushrooms grow at their own pace, and it seems like sometimes it's quite fast. So I imagine you're picking a lot. You can't just pick and choose when to harvest.
Sometimes we'll have a thunderstorm, and they go nuts. I love it. They for some reason mushrooms like thunderstorms. I'll show you this mushroom here. So we're picking them as they open up.
Yep.
And you can just see the veil just giving way.
So the stem is just disconnected from the cup a
That's
little
right, yeah. You can see.
And that's the sign, it's time to pick it.
Yeah, it's a good time to
That's
pick.
great. Can we go for a bit of hunt around and find a couple that I can cook up for you later?
Yeah, let's go and find some. I reckon we can do that.
Paul, we've picked some beautiful shiitake mushrooms. It's now time to cook them. And I love shiitakes because they have such a beautiful meaty flavour. And I also use them whenever I make a stock. I love adding some fresh shiitake in because they have such a really meaty umami flavour. So I thought we'd use shiitake mushrooms in two ways today. We'll make a stock and then we'll cook a risotto with that stock and then add some shiitakes in to the risotto. What do you reckon?
I reckon that sounds brilliant.
We need to pick out some shiitakes to start with. Now,
all pretty good.
While the mushrooms were being picked, I made a really quick stock and I've added in some seaweed. I've got some kombu.
Do you?
I've also got some shiitakes in there. Fresh shiitake I find really great for a stock base. And then just a couple of tablespoons of miso as well. So we're going to do a really Japanese-inspired risotto. We're going to keep it vegan. It's all about the meatiness of those mushrooms.
Right.
Now we're going to start by adding some oil into our pan and frying off our onion and our garlic. So we want a good glug of our extra virgin olive oil. It's going to help us cook down and fry off all those vegetables we're adding in. And while I do that, do you want to chop up the mushrooms? Nice and thin slices. And do you want to pass me the onion there as well? And that's going to go straight into our oil and start frying off. This will be the base of our risotto. So we're going to go classic Italian risotto technique of slowly stirring the rice in to agitate the rice and get the starches out to make our risotto really creamy. But we're going to use Japanese ingredients because you've got those beautiful mushrooms and things like miso and seaweed go so well with those shiitake mushrooms. Great. So I'm going to fry the onion off here for a minute or so, just till it starts to soften. It's always a good sign for me when frying an onion, when you see it softening, is you know it's sort of ready to add the next step into it. Now, tell me, you guys have access to a lot of mushrooms. What's your favourite way to have mushrooms after a long day of picking mushrooms?
I quite like tempura.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, with the right dipping sauce, they can be beautiful.
That's
probably my favourite way to have them.
I love tempura mushrooms.
I have had them in ice cream before, but not one of my recipes. Yeah,
that sounds really interesting.
One of those nice Melbourne restaurants. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was pretty fancy.
They were starting with a pretty good mushroom. That's the key to a good mushroom ice cream, is it? You've got to know the right mushroom farmer.
Yeah, that helps.
Going to be a little bit controlled on our salt because we do have quite a salty stock with all that miso and the seaweed in there. And now I've got some garlic cloves here. I've just sliced them really thinly. They're going to add the flavour into the stock as well. And once you've chopped that last mushroom, we're going to go straight in with them as well. We're just going to saute these off and really cook them down. I find by cooking and frying our mushrooms off, we're going to really develop that lovely flavour they have, that richness, almost meatiness that you get from shiitake mushrooms. So we're going to slowly cook these down and sweat them off. And I always say put a little bit of time in at this stage to drag in as much flavour as possible. Now, for you as a farmer, it's not just a passion, although I know you're very passionate about it.
Elements of that.
It's also a business. So how important is it for you to partner with the right people to keep your farm going and be able to keep growing such amazing mushrooms?
Oh, it's important. We've got a certain amount of debt, and having people who understand what we're doing, it's really important. So we're partnering with Rabobank. They've been good. Very much agricultural focus. I think that helps. And so the people we're dealing with can speak the same language. That really helps, of course.
I mean, I'm sure it's very important they understand what you're doing because to get stuff to this higher quality, you need that sort of support, and it takes a lot of effort.
It does take a lot of effort. No matter what you're doing with growing stuff, there's a certain amount of effort and love too. Hopefully that comes through in the produce.
So you can see our mushrooms have cooked down now, and they've started to really intensify in flavour. Our onions and our garlic are really soft. Beautiful. So now it's time to add our rice. Now, arborio rice, classic risotto rice, Really starchy, so when you stir it, the creamy starch comes out and gives that lovely sauce that you expect from risotto. So a couple of cups of rice in there. And at this stage, you actually want to fry your rice off in the oil.
So a bit of heat there.
Just to start toasting it, yeah. And that's actually going to help break down the outside of our rice and help it start absorbing the liquid when we start adding liquid into it. So just for a minute or so, just to slowly toast off and fry off our rice. So now our rice is fried off. We're going to start by adding some wine. You could add some sake to keep it really Japanese. Even some Chinese cooking wine would go well. But I like for instance, we're going to get added in from that wine. That'll go really well with the mushrooms. And now when you're adding your liquid into your risotto, stir, and don't add any more liquid until the last batch has been hydrated. Okay. So we're going to add in liquid, soak it into the rice, add the next bit in. And it'll hydrate and soak it up pretty quickly, but it's worth doing it at a sort of steady rate, not trying to force it, because what you start getting, you can sort of start seeing it here, is that sort of creamy colour that our mixture's getting, and that's the starches coming out of the rice, and that's going to give us that really nice, creamy, saucy risotto, which is what I love about risotto.
Nice, and then from there we just keep adding.
Add until it's ready. And you don't have to stir non-stop. You can sort of stir for a minute or so, come back, add a bit more liquid, stir.
You're really just looking at that consistency there.
Exactly right. So we're going to just start by adding a ladle of our stock in now. Now, you just want to add the stock. You want to leave out the mushrooms and the seaweed.
They're the best part, aren't
they? They are. Now, they've done their job. They've added all the flavour. So they've imparted their flavour in the dish. Now it's time to add that flavour to our rice. So I'm just going to now give it a little gentle stir and let that rice start to hydrate with that stock. This is getting nice and cloudy, and that's the starches coming out of the rice. So what we're going to do here is just going to keep adding a little bit of stock and stirring, adding a little bit of stock and stirring till this risotto gets the consistency that I'm looking for, and I want it to be able to pour off my spoon. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but we'll get there and it'll be tasting delicious. Now, your mushrooms are pretty famous around these parts. I believe.
Pretty well known.
Yeah, I believe you supply some pretty amazing restaurants.
We have, closest to here is Bray.
Oh. Good.
And
one of the best restaurants in the world.
It's a pretty good way to start.
Yeah.
They've been very supportive of us right from the first mushrooms we produce. A little bit further afield, but Moon is a nice little restaurant that's just opened up.
Yeah, nice.
Down on the way to Anglesey.
Beautiful.
And then Igny in Geelong.
Another winner. I love Igny.
Good restaurant.
That's a cracker.
And then we do supply numerous restaurants up in Melbourne, but the one that comes to mind is Ides. They've been pretty supportive right through. They're standing order pretty much. So.
That's a pretty amazing list of restaurants. They'd be in the top 10 or 20 best restaurants in Melbourne.
That's good. Yeah.
I've been to a couple of them, so I have to make sure you get me reservations the other couple.
And I'm hoping you'll help me out on the other two that I haven't been to yet.
Perfect. We'll go there together.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I feel really honoured to be able to use their mushrooms, the same mushrooms they're using.
They might have been cut with a bit more finesse had we been at one of their restaurants, that's all.
No, they're going to taste just as good. So you can see now our risotto has hydrated and soaked in all that beautiful shiitake mushroom stock. Yep. You can see it's still nice and loose, but it's super creamy. That's just the starch coming out of that rice, combining with that really rich and intense mushroom stock. So this is ready. I'm going to turn the heat off now because I want to keep it nice and loose. So I've got some liquids here we're going to sort of season our risotto with. So white soy sauce, just to give it a nice light colour, but you can also use the light soy. Just a splash of that to add some nice salt. And then I've got some mirin. That's going to add a nice little bit of sugar and sweetness, as well as some tartness. And then some rice wine vinegar. So again, Italian technique, lots of Japanese ingredients just to keep those flavours going.
A good bit of fusion cooking there.
Exactly right. Now we're going back to the Italian ingredients. Just for some warmth, a bit of black pepper. So now we can plate up our risotto, Paul. So I'll show you the texture that I like in risotto. So you can see here it's going to spread on the plate. When I do this, and I just give it a little tap underneath, it'll spread out nice and it's almost saucy, which is what I like in a risotto. I don't want it to be too thick, and we haven't added any cheese here, so we won't get too much thickness anyway. To finish it off, some spring onions, and I've got some nori as well. So our spring onions, I'm just going to slice on the bias, just the green part. Going to give us a nice little pop of flavour, a great little pop of colour as well. You also get a nice fresh texture as well, and just carefully scatter them over the top, just like so. And then got some toasted nori here. So, you know, the seaweed that wraps up your sushi usually. This is great as a garnish. You just toast it. So all I've done is wave it over the top of our burner, just in a pair of tongs so you don't burn your fingers. And then I'm just going to break it up and kind of just crunch on some bits of nori like so. And this will add a really nice salty and umami flavour. on the top of our risotto and a slightly crispy, crunchy texture as well. And then, because I love the pepperiness of extra virgin olive oil, just a little drizzle over the top. Paul, there you have a risotto inspired by classic Italian techniques, but using lots of Japanese ingredients and, of course, the incredible shiitake mushrooms that you grow here on your farm.
That's great.
How does that look?
Oh, I'm going to taste some of that, I think. Looks very good.